Everyone thought she died peacefully in her sleep until a nurse slapped her lifeless cheek in front of a church full of mourners and exposed a secret so dark it shattered the illusion of the grieving billionaire husband. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel as a sign of support. The hallway of Cedar Heights Memorial Hospital was quiet that afternoon. Nurses bustled in and out of patient rooms, doctors murmured in hushed tones, and monitors beeped their steady rhythm. But room 413 was eerily silent. It was the private suite reserved for the ultra-wealthy. A room with fresh flowers, a city skyline view, and today, a woman who lay still beneath white hospital sheets. Vivian Dalton was gone. At 63, she had been the wife of Gregory Dalton, one of the most influential tech magnates in Chicago. He'd made his fortune building a logistics empire from the ground up, and Vivian had been his poised, elegant partner through every merger and acquisition. Everyone knew her as a socialite, a fundraiser host, a woman of grace. But beneath the surface, whispers had long circulated about what really happened behind the gates of the Daltons' lakeside mansion. Gregory stood at the foot of the hospital bed now, dressed impeccably in a gray tailored suit. His steel blue eyes showed no tears, just calculation. Around him stood their lawyer, a family friend or two, and a few of his aides. A somber scene, but also strangely cold. Nurse Kayla Henderson was the last to enter the room. Young, sharp-eyed, and just 5 years into her career, Kayla had been assigned to Vivian for the past 3 months. Most of her shifts had been quiet, with few visitors other than the occasional PR team checking how Vivian's condition might affect Gregory's image. Kayla swallowed hard as she saw Vivian's lifeless body. Her skin was pale, her lips slightly parted. But it wasn't grief that burned inside Kayla. It was something else, something deeper. She turned to the group. "Has the doctor signed the death certificate yet?" Gregory didn't look at her. "Yes, Dr. Allen came by 15 minutes ago. It's over." Everyone assumed Kayla would then begin preparing Vivian's body for transport, as protocol dictated. But instead, she took a slow step forward, then another, until she stood right beside the bed. And without warning, without saying a single word, Kayla raised her hand and slapped Vivian sharply across the face. Gasps exploded around the room. One of Gregory's aides shouted, "What the hell was that?" The lawyer nearly dropped his leather folder. Even Gregory finally looked up, his eyes narrowing. Kayla didn't move. Her chest rose and fell heavily, her fingers trembling just slightly. But her voice, when it finally came, was even and firm. "She needed to know someone saw her," Kayla said. "Someone saw what he did to her." The room went silent again, this time thick with tension. Gregory's gaze locked onto hers. "You've made a serious mistake, young lady." But Kayla didn't flinch. She stared right back, no longer afraid. "No, Mr. Dalton. The mistake was letting you get away with it for so long." The fallout from Kayla's actions was immediate. Within 20 minutes, hospital security had been called. A heavy-set guard named Reggie, who'd seen more than his share of chaos in the emergency room, looked completely thrown off when he arrived at room 413. "You slapped a dead woman?" he asked Kayla as he escorted her to the administrative office. "I didn't hurt her," Kayla replied, her voice calm but resolute. "I honored her." In the admin wing, she was met by Chief Nurse Becky Sanford, a no-nonsense woman with 30 years of experience and a Rolodex full of connections. Kayla was asked to sit in a windowless room while HR scrambled to respond. Gregory Dalton, as expected, had already made a few calls. "He's demanding your termination," Becky said, arms folded, pacing like a lion. "And frankly, Kayla, I don't know how I can protect you unless you give me a damn good reason." Kayla sat still. She didn't want to cry. She couldn't afford to. Instead, she reached into her scrubs pocket and pulled out a tiny notebook. "Vivian Dalton kept telling me things," she said softly, "and I wrote them down, because I didn't think anyone would ever believe me otherwise." Becky raised an eyebrow. "What kind of things?" She was scared of him, not just the kind of scared you get when someone's powerful. I mean terrified. She used to flinch when the door opened. She said he drugged her, Becky. Said the reason she couldn't speak half the time wasn't just her illness. It was what he was giving her. Becky stopped pacing. She told me that if anything ever happened to her suddenly, if she died without worsening symptoms, that I should speak up. I didn't know how until now. Becky was quiet for a long moment, then finally asked, "Why the slap?" Kayla clenched her jaw. To shake the room, to make people look at her, really look at her, for the first time in years. She was invisible in that marriage. Gregory had turned her into this silent statue. And now he was going to bury her with a press statement and move on. I couldn't let that happen. At that moment, a knock at the door interrupted them. A hospital administrator stepped in with a nervous expression. Mr. Dalton's legal team just threatened a lawsuit. They're claiming misconduct, emotional distress, the works. Kayla stood up. Good, let him push it. What are you talking about? Becky asked. If he sues me, I get discovery. We can subpoena her medical records, her private nurse logs, the surveillance from her house. Let him throw the first punch. Becky stared at her for a moment, then slowly sat down across from her. For the first time, there was a flicker of respect in her eyes. You're either a damn fool or a damn hero, Kayla, she said. Kayla looked down at her hands, still red from the slap. Maybe a little of both. By the next morning, the story had already leaked. An anonymous tip, likely from someone inside the hospital, had made its way to a popular Chicago blog that specialized in high-profile scandals. The headline read, "Nurse slaps deceased wife of tech tycoon, claims she was silenced by husband." Gregory Dalton was furious. He appeared on local news looking composed, but his words dripped with venom. My wife was a delicate woman suffering from neurological decline. It is outrageous that a caregiver would exploit her condition for attention or revenge. I will ensure that justice is served. Kayla watched the news clip from her small one-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park. She sipped black coffee with a trembling hand. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Reporters, lawyers, internet strangers. Half the messages called her brave. The other half labeled her unhinged. She ignored them all. What mattered now was what Vivian left behind. Vivian had once whispered something during a particularly lucid night. Her voice had been raspy, like dried leaves rustling in the wind. "The blue box," she'd said, "in the closet. Don't let him sell the house before you check it." At the time, Kayla hadn't pressed. Vivian often said cryptic things, but now it meant everything. The Daltons' estate sat on Lake Michigan, a sprawling modern mansion with automated gates, security cameras, and hired help. But Vivian had told Kayla where the spare key was hidden, taped behind a false panel inside the stone garden lantern. Kayla made the drive 2 nights later. Dressed in black and wearing a hoodie, she slipped into the back entrance like a ghost. The house was cold, quiet, empty. She moved through the marble halls like she'd been there 1,000 times, which wasn't far from the truth. She'd been sent to the home twice before, during Vivian's brief hospice transfers. She knew where the bedroom was, and she knew where the closet was. The blue jewelry box sat exactly where Vivian described, tucked behind a stack of old purses on the top shelf. Kayla's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a folded letter, yellowed at the edges. The handwriting was unmistakably Vivian's, elegant and looping. It was addressed to whomever finds this, please tell the truth. Kayla read each word, her eyes scanning faster as the letter unfurled a nightmare. Vivian described how Gregory had begun slipping her sedatives not prescribed by any doctor, how her mental fog had started only after she contested the terms of his will, how she believed he was slowly poisoning her, not enough to kill her outright, but to discredit her mind and accelerate her decline. She even mentioned an incident where her nurse call button had been disconnected for hours. I don't know how much time I have, the letter read, but if anyone finds this, please let them know I never gave up. I was trapped in silence, and I needed someone to listen. Kayla folded the letter and pressed it to her chest. It wasn't just evidence, it was a lifeline and a warning. With the letter clutched in her purse and adrenaline still burning in her veins, Kayla didn't go home. Instead, she drove across town to a small art gallery in Old Town Chicago, one she remembered Vivian mentioning often in passing. Melissa still paints, she had once murmured, her voice weak from the hospital bed. She was the only one who knew, the only one I could tell. Kayla had assumed Melissa was just a friend, maybe a therapist. But now, with the letter in hand and the clock ticking, she had to follow every thread. Gregory had power, money, and legal muscle. What Kayla had was the truth, but truth needed backup. The gallery was dimly lit, warm with the scent of turpentine and old wood. Paintings lined the walls, abstract shapes, stormy skies, and portraits with hidden sadness behind the eyes. A woman in her late 60s stood behind the desk, wearing paint-smeared overalls. Her gray hair was tied back in a messy bun, and her hands were stained with blue pigment. "Can I help you?" she asked cautiously. Kayla stepped forward. "Are you Melissa Travers?" "I am." Kayla lowered her voice. "I was Vivian Dalton's nurse. She mentioned you." Melissa's expression changed instantly. Her mouth tightened. She passed 3 days ago," Kayla said softly. "But I don't think it was natural. And I think you know what I mean." Melissa's eyes searched Kayla's face, studying her like one of her canvases. "Come with me." She led Kayla through the gallery and into a small back studio. There, amid canvases and stacked brushes, she poured them both a cup of tea. "She wasn't crazy," Melissa said, before Kayla even opened her mouth. "Everyone thought she was losing her mind. But it wasn't dementia, it was fear, it was drugs. She called me crying once, said Gregory had changed her pills and she didn't know who she was anymore." "She wrote it all down," Kayla said, pulling the folded letter from her bag. Melissa took it with trembling hands and read it. Her eyes welled with tears by the end. "She was going to leave him, you know," she said. "Before all this started, she even saw a divorce lawyer. But then, her behavior changed overnight. She started forgetting things, slurring her speech. She called me one night convinced she was being watched inside her own house. I found this letter hidden in her jewelry box," Kayla added. "She wanted someone to tell her story. I just don't know how to protect it. He'll bury this." Melissa walked over to a drawer and pulled out a worn folder. "She sent me this last year, a list of medications she was being given. Some weren't on her medical chart. I've kept it quiet until now, but if you're ready to fight, so am I." Kayla felt a surge of strength rise in her chest. They were no longer alone. Vivian hadn't been crazy, and now the war for the truth had begun, with 2 women willing to risk everything. By the end of the week, Kayla found herself suspended from her nursing position, pending investigation. No surprise, Gregory Dalton's legal team had sent a 12-page cease and desist letter to the hospital administration, branding her a disgruntled employee trying to stir public outrage for fame. It didn't stop there. She received emails from numbers she didn't recognize, threatening to drop this while you still can. Her apartment had been broken into, though nothing was taken, only her drawers rifled through and the contents of her filing cabinet scattered across the floor. Police called it random. Kayla knew better, but for every intimidation attempt, something stronger was building underneath. People were starting to ask questions. It started with a blog post Melissa wrote, titled "The Silenced Socialite," published anonymously but quickly shared across online platforms. The post hinted at Vivian's possible drugging, the sudden shift in her cognitive health, and the suspicious behavior of her high-profile husband. No names, but the message was clear. Soon, former household staff began reaching out. A maid named Carla messaged Kayla privately. "I saw him swap her pills once. Swear to God, didn't think anything of it till now." A former chauffeur added, "Vivian used to whisper things in the back seat, like she was afraid the car was bugged." Kayla began compiling everything. Vivian's letter, Melissa's documents, the employee testimonies. With Melissa's help, she hired a small legal team led by a young civil rights attorney named Max Gordon. He believed in the underdog and didn't blink when Kayla handed over the evidence. "This isn't just emotional abuse," Max said during their first meeting. "This could be medical assault, power of attorney fraud, maybe even manslaughter if we can prove intent." Meanwhile, Gregory Dalton doubled down. He announced a lavish memorial service at the city's oldest cathedral, complete with live orchestra and a closed casket display. It was set to be televised, a public show of mourning from a grieving billionaire. Kayla knew the timing was strategic. "He's trying to rewrite the narrative," she told Melissa, "to paint her as this gentle wife who slipped away peacefully." "Then we flipped the script," Melissa replied. They arranged for a private reporter from a major newspaper to meet with them the night before the funeral. Max handed over their carefully curated folder of evidence, and Kayla told her story again, this time on record. The reporter leaned back wide-eyed. If this is true, this is bigger than just a scandal. This is systemic abuse hidden by money and silence. As the story took shape, so did their plan. They wouldn't storm the funeral. They wouldn't start a public screaming match. Instead, they would let Gregory bury his wife in roses and guilt-free speeches, then show the world who he really was. The only question was, would the world be ready to believe it? It was a crisp Saturday morning when the funeral took place. Chicago's historic St. Michael's Cathedral was draped in white lilies, somber music drifting through the stained glass windows as the city's elite filed into pews. Politicians, tech moguls, media figures, everyone who wanted to stay in Gregory Dalton's good graces had shown up. Kayla sat across the street inside a coffee shop, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, eyes fixed on the live stream of the service, playing silently on her phone. Melissa sat beside her, quietly stirring a bitter espresso. "He's doing it," Kayla said bitterly. "He's rewriting her life right there on the altar." Gregory stood at the podium, face solemn and eyes dry. "Vivian was the love of my life. Her illness was cruel, and her courage was unmatched. She died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by love." Melissa muttered under her breath, "What love? The help she wasn't allowed to speak to?" The entire city would be watching that funeral. Gregory was spinning a story, clean and tight, using grief like a weapon to erase the past. But what he didn't know was that, as he spoke, the truth had already started spreading. At exactly 11:15 a.m., during the final hymn, the Chicago Tribune dropped a breaking news article online. Slapped awake, the hidden abuse behind Vivian Dalton's death. It hit like a thunderclap. The piece included excerpts from Vivian's handwritten letter, anonymous testimonies from household staff, and legal commentary from Max Gordon outlining the disturbing possibility that Gregory Dalton had orchestrated a slow, silent attack on his wife's body and mind. The article didn't accuse directly. It didn't need to. The evidence did the talking. Back at the cathedral, murmurs began to ripple through the crowd. Phones buzzed, heads turned. Even the priest paused briefly as an assistant whispered something into his ear. Gregory noticed. His eyes, once calm, darted anxiously across the pews. He stepped away from the pulpit and leaned toward his assistant. Whatever was said turned his face to stone. He clenched his jaw, his confident posture faltering for the first time. Across the street, Kayla watched the shift in real time. "He saw it," she whispered. Melissa grinned, just slightly. "Good." Back at the coffee shop, Max called. "You're trending. Social media is exploding. People are demanding an investigation. One of the hospital board members just reached out asking for a private meeting." Kayla closed her eyes. The tension, the fear, the sleepless nights, it all swirled into something sharper now. A sense of justice, finally beginning to breathe. But they weren't finished yet. Gregory would retaliate. He had the money, the lawyers, the media contacts, but now he was playing defense. And worse, for the first time, he no longer controlled the story. Vivian had spoken, even in death, and Kayla had made sure the world was listening. 3 weeks after the funeral, Gregory Dalton was subpoenaed. The Chicago District Attorney's Office had opened a preliminary inquiry into possible elder abuse, medical fraud, and suspicious manipulation of Vivian Dalton's care plan. While no charges had yet been filed, public pressure was mounting. The Tribune article had sparked a wave of editorials, interviews, and calls for reform in how wealthy patients' rights and lives were protected. Kayla sat in a conference room alongside Max, Melissa, and 2 state investigators. Her nerves raw, but her resolve unshakable. She had told Vivian's story so many times now. It had moved from painful memory to purposeful mission. "This wasn't just about me losing a job," she said, hands folded tightly in her lap. "This was about a woman who cried for help in every way she could, through her silence, her fear, her notes, and no one listened, until someone did." Melissa backed her up with Vivian's handwritten medication logs and a voice recording she'd saved from months ago. A fragment of a call where Vivian whispered, "He's changing things. I'm not who I was. Please, if something happens, don't let him tell my story for me." That recording was played on national television that night. Public sympathy turned swiftly. Protesters stood outside Dalton Technologies headquarters, holding signs that read, "Listen to Vivian, and truth is louder than money." The hospital board reopened Kayla's suspension case and quietly reinstated her with full back pay. But she turned the offer down. By now, she had something bigger in motion. Melissa helped her launch the Vivian Project, a nonprofit dedicated to protecting vulnerable patients from exploitation in private care. It would include a legal hotline for nurses, caregivers, and families to report suspected abuse, anonymously and safely. "We may not have saved Vivian," Kayla told the press at the launch event, "but we will save the next one." As for Gregory Dalton, his silence became his downfall. He refused interviews, filed restraining orders against reporters, and even attempted to sue Kayla and Melissa for defamation. But in court, the burden of truth weighed heavier than his bank account. Depositions revealed that his private doctor had altered prescriptions without consulting hospital staff. Surveillance footage from the mansion, subpoenaed reluctantly, showed long hours of Vivian left unattended or being wheeled out of frame by staff who were never identified. The DA didn't yet have enough to press murder charges, but they had more than enough to freeze some of his assets and open a full investigation into healthcare fraud. The image of the grieving, loyal husband, gone. He had been slapped with a truth he couldn't erase. One cold morning, Kayla returned to Vivian's gravesite. She placed a single blue rose beside the headstone, then sat on the bench in silence for a while. "You weren't crazy," she whispered. "You were brave. You were right. And now, everyone knows." The wind blew gently through the trees. In the quiet that followed, it almost sounded like a sigh of relief. Vivian Dalton's tragic story revealed the terrifying ease with which power can silence the most vulnerable, and the courage it takes to stand against it. Thanks to Kayla's unwavering commitment and Melissa's loyalty, the truth came to light. It wasn't just about one woman, it was about protecting others from suffering in silence. If this story moved you, share it. Speak up when something feels wrong, and support the caregivers and whistleblowers who risk everything to defend those who can't defend themselves.